So as usual, we're going to go through any new features and any fixes that have been implemented in TransIT. And then we've got a couple of things on the tip of the month page. I'm going to go through and read through each of these before I show them. There's a lot here to show. And as I'm showing them, if people have questions, as always, please feel free to ask. This first one is a request we received recently, and we're able to get it in pretty quickly, which is that when you go into the testing page, it's always set to show just 100 records, and it's always set to show just the remaining. So now there's a user setting that you can go into your own user record and turn on the ability to remove the remaining filter or turn on the ability to always have page size all. So that may or may not be something you'd be interested in, but I know I personally immediately set the page size all on mine. When you create a new scenario, it used to put you into the scenario steps page in that same window. It now opens in a new window, which I know if you create a lot of scenarios, you're probably going to say, yay, I'm glad that was added. Previously in the header, there wasn't a way of showing two patient names if it was a trauma case or somebody who came in who was unconscious and they were starting out either using a trauma registration or a John Doe as a name. There was no way to indicate the trauma name or the John Doe name as well as their real name, and that's now been changed. Also, you now have the ability to display more than two fields. I'm not sure if everyone on the call knows that we recently added the ability to display two fields. And of course, as soon as we did that, people wanted to know, could you do more? And so we have set up a way to enter more than two fields in that header column on the test dashboard. And the example is shown there, and I can show that when we go through things. So to get more fields to show than two, you have to put them all into the patient name field. And so you would put the patient name and then you would put any fields after it using the square bracketed field name. Oops. You can now export the vendor list. I'm not sure how useful that is to people, but there was a request to be able to export the list with what your site has turned on, and you now can do that. We also enhanced the functionality of the workflow open scenario box. So it used to be when you click the box, it would show you what scenarios the workflows were in. Now it additionally shows you how many instances of that workflow are in the scenario. And when you take the link to go to the scenario, instead of it being a filtered list that shows you just the workflow, it's now positioned to the first instance of the workflow, but the real step numbers are identified. So it takes you to the first one. And then if you want to get, say there was 3 instances of it, if you scroll through it, it's in page size all. And so it'll allow you to see the other instances because they'll all be highlighted. So it makes it much easier for updating workflows. I will say that there is also coming in the future a work queue to be able to, when you update a workflow, automatically add the scenarios that have that workflow in it to a work queue so that you can work them at your leisure, as well as if you make a change to a task. So say there was a task that you used to have 3 or 4 details in and you decided to replace one or more of those details with a square bracketed field name, there's going to be that same work queue to be able to go and make sure that those details in the scenarios are all correct after you make that change. We had recently added functionality for the Build Audit to be able to step through instances of steps missing positions by double clicking, but it was a little bit, it didn't work perfectly. So it's now been fixed so that when you run the Build Audit, when you go inside, the icon is there to be able to move between steps that are missing positions, and you can go to the next one without fixing it by just a single click. In TransIT 4, there was an ability to associate a test round to a specific project. We lost that in TransIT 5, so that's been added back. We also added a filter to both application and task in the test report. Fixes for testing. Probably no one knew this, but tester level users could inactivate and restore test rounds, so they can no longer do that. Admins obviously can and users can, but testers cannot. When you filter to the scenario steps page, using any of the filters, it used to renumber so that whatever you filtered to would start at number 1, even though the step was really 301. So now it retains the actual real number of the step. In TransIT 4, there was a vendor called custom, and every client could add products, applications, and functions themselves under that custom vendor. That also went away in TransIT 4, and that's been restored. There was a bug in the test roster where if you had a inactive user, so somebody who's no longer working at your organization, you'd inactivated that user and they had positions turned on that they were supporting, it screwed up the test roster and those positions didn't even show on the test roster. So that's now been corrected. As well, special characters screw up section names in functional scenarios, so you're now blocked from using special characters. A couple new features for issues. We added the ability to multi-select issues on the issue page and change all of those fields listed there. So the assigned, emergency change, estimated hours, impact, priority, requested date, resolve number, and status. We also added right-click options to be able to change the project associated to more than one issue at once. You could always change the test round, but you couldn't change the project. So now you can do both of those two things. Moving on to plans. We've just put into production the first release of plans security. So some of our clients had said to us that they wanted to be able to use plans for some ERP projects they were working on, but that they often had links in their plans to things that were sensitive, like, pay scales and things like that. So we've added some security around plans for that, and also just to make sure that you have an ability to have more control over who accesses each of your plans. So to be able to use this functionality, there's a edit plan checkbox, and security only applies if you turn that checkbox on for a given project. There's a column in the plans page that tells you which plans have security turned on and which ones don't. You can add users or a user role to define the project managers of the plan and who has full access. And regardless of who you give access to, admins will always have full access. You can also add users to roles to define your team and update the progress or add columns to any task in the plan. You can let anyone that's assigned to an activity access to update the progress of their activities. You can also have an activity that has a role assigned, and people who are assigned to that role will also be able to update even if they are not the person assigned to that activity. So you've assigned an activity to somebody to deploy a whole bunch of printers, and it was just the lead on the desktop team or whatever, and now that person's on vacation, so other people will be able to access it as long as you assigned it to the desktop team and you had those people in the desktop team role. You can also hide a plan from the list to anyone without access so that they won't know it's there. And if there's an activity that you're not supposed to be able to update, it's grayed out. You can go in and type things in, but it won't save. And only admins and project managers and the creator can edit the project plan security. So if you aren't one of those three people, you can't go in and tick that security box and turn it on for that plan. You can now assign multiple roles to an activity in a plan. So you've always been able to assign multiple assignees, but now you could say a task was for the Oracle SE and the client side SE. You could put both roles out there, whereas before you could only choose one role. When you use the right-click insert option, and this one was one that always bothered me, when you inserted a row into a plan, it always defaulted to the start date of the plan. So if the start date of the plan was 6 months ago, it was still defaulting to that date, as opposed to now when you insert it, it defaults to the start date of the activity that you're inserting above. So even if it's not the right date, it's certainly going to be a lot closer than in my example where your project was 6 months long and you're 6 months in. We also added the ability to send messages. It's a standard time, 5 p.m. Eastern, to the assigned user for any activity in a plan that has been updated. And so that is turned off by default. So if you want to use that functionality, you have to actually contact our support desk and get us to turn it on for the organization. So there's a single setting for the organization at this point. It's either on or off, and everybody is defaulted to off right now. Fixes for plans. The right-click log issue in the multi-plan view is no longer, so when you log an issue in multi-plan, it's no longer missing the hyperlink to the issue, and you can hover with the and see the issue information. Also in TransIT 4, we had the ability to copy a plan, and that was taken away in TransIT 5, and that's now been restored. There was a alignment issue for a period of time in the roles and activities when we added the ability to assign multiple roles to an activity, and that's now been corrected. There was an issue preventing using the right-click edit for tasks that have single quotes in the name. And so you now can do that. So I think it was the tip of the month last time. Try not to use special characters at all. There's obviously times where you need to use quotes or, things like that. But some special characters have special meaning in HTML, so it does lend to issues. Okay, so I'll hopefully, after we start going through, I'll hopefully have time to get to these. But if I don't, I'll tell you the one thing that I want to point out is in most places in TransIT, there is a TransIT refresh at the bottom of the page. It's much preferable for you to use that than for you to use the browser refresh. So for me, for example, I was working on a project and I was continuously filtering to see the oncology scenarios, and I kept forgetting about that filter, that refresh at the bottom. So every time I'd refresh my page, I'd lose that filter. So that one will save you time if you remember, and it's in most places in TransIT. There's that refresh that we've added at the bottom. So that refresh will refresh, but save whatever filters you've got turned on. I'm also going to try to show a scenario where making really good use of header fields really speeds up the test script creation and maintenance process. So as an example, we try to put as many of the square bracketed header fields in workflows as possible. And then it makes those workflows very easy to use. So in the same project, they had, sometimes 10, sometimes 20, sometimes 30 appointments being scheduled in a scenario. And so we just kept on pulling in the same workflow over and over again. And we would use appointment type and then appointment type 2 and appointment type 3 and so on, all through 20 appointments. And it became very easy to quickly update those scripts. As well, in IT1 and IT2, we moved days in the script. So instead of having to go through and change anything in the script, all we did was update the header. So again, I really want to stress how much time the header fields save. Again, I did mention previously that the reminders for plans are automatically turned off. And so if you do want to get that turned on for your organization, you have to email support@makeSolutionsInc.com. And then a little known piece of functionality that exists is the ability to create custom drop-down lists in TransIT. I was testing it out a little bit before. I'm not positive that it works for our standard columns in plans, but it definitely does work for custom columns in plans, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get there. And so now I need to figure out how to be able to go through the list in order here and not miss anything. So hopefully I'll do a okay job with that. Okay, so going back to the new features for testing, I talked about the fact that there is a new setting, a user setting. So you click your name and it brings up all of your existing settings. And there's these two new ones down here for test rounds. So one, like I said, is removing the remaining filter. And the thought behind that is a lot of people do want to look at the steps previous to what they've been just working on. By removing the remaining filter and having page size all set at the same time, it sets it so that you just see everything that day. So this one, I'm not sure how many people will like that when they use it. This one, like I said, I immediately turned on for myself, but both of these are here and available for use. And obviously you just tick whatever you want and click save. In my case, I'll not change it, so I'll just click cancel. Again, we said the steps, the scenario page. If you go in and you want to create a new scenario and you click save on that, you can see it now opened in a new window, and I'm in the scenario steps page here. So that's much preferable to, again, like I said, opening in the same window and losing whatever filters you had set here on your scenarios page. So showing the patient name and the patient name too. If we just go into the header on this one, if you wanted to show patient name, and actually I better do it in the scenario, in a test round so that you can actually do I have a test round set up? No. Okay. If we go into a test round, it's probably easier to see. So if we go here to the dashboard and you see that this one here looks like I already have it set up. So in this case, it's using patient name and patient name 2. So if we go in and we do edit test header, then you can see I've got patient name 1 and patient name 2. So it used to be even if you had patient name 1 and patient name 2 that it did not pull in, and now it does. So if it's a little bit further on and I wanted to instead show the MRN and the patient name, I can then tick patient name. Oh, sorry, it would probably in this case be patient name 2, wouldn't it? And the MRN. And then when we close that window and go back, you see it shows that second patient name 2 and your MRN. If, on the other hand, you wanted it to show more than that, then you're going to have to put it into that patient name 1 field. So if we go back in here, what that would look like is you would come in here and take that off, take this off, and update my fin. And you would come into this field here and you would say, okay, I now want to show patient name 2. And I want to show my MRN. Oops. And my fin. So if I save that and close that window, you can see that it displays everything I've put into that field. So again, that was a specific request to be able to show more than 2 fields at a time. So instead of setting a limit and saying, okay, you can show 3, or you can show 4, now it's completely up to you and it's whatever you put in that patient 1 field. Okay, the next one then is being able to export the vendor list. Again, you know, it'd only be your admins who actually have access to this. So if you go to the vendors and you right click, then there's an export tree or tree export. And when you click tree export, it's going to, whoops, apparently it's going to open up automatically on my computer. It's going to open up in Excel, and you might have yours set to automatically download, and I obviously have mine set to automatically download and open, and it'll give you the whole tree structure of whatever it is you have set up. I think the thought behind that was that there was a client who wanted to use plans for their application responsibility matrix, and they wanted to have the list of all of the applications. So that was what that was requested for. Okay, the next one then is the workflow scenario box. So if I go here, okay, this was just one that I happened to know had more than one instance. So you've always been able to click here and hover. You've always been able to click here and open the box. The differences are that right now it now tells you, before you could have gone to this scenario and fixed the workflow in one scenario and not realized that it was 12 times in the scenario. Now it at least tells you how many instances there are in that scenario. And you always could click this link to take you to the scenario. But when you used to do it, it used to take you to a filtered list, and the line number, the step number would say 1 here. So you can see really this is step number 57 in the scenario, and it used to take you to only that workflow. So if you inserted something in between these two, then you couldn't see that you'd inserted it because it was only filtered to things in that workflow. And now it displays the whole thing. And again, like if I was going to scroll down, so this one said it had 2 instances. That was our first instance. And if I scroll down, I get to the second instance. So again, this is much improving the workflow for now, but there is planned functionality coming in the future where we would actually have a work queue to work those changes. And hopefully everybody thinks that will be a huge time saver. The scenario build audit. So hopefully everybody knows that to run the scenario build audit, you can select, any number of scripts and click Build Audit. It'll tell you that it's doing it in the background. This is one of the places where you can use this little refresh down here. So this is the refresh I was talking about in my tip. If you use this refresh, it'll keep whatever filtering you have on. If you use your browser refresh up here, it won't. So in my case, where I was only caring about the oncology scenarios, and this specific client had like 200 or 300 scenarios there, and I only wanted to filter to my 40, I was so much happier after someone on my team pointed out, we'll just use the refresh at the bottom, Patty. So, okay, so if we wanted to now, since we've run the build audit, if we want to go into this scenario, then we can open it in a new page like I did here. And then you're going to click this little icon here, and it's going to take you to the first instance where there's missing a step. And so I don't know if you noticed step 1, 2, and 3 were missing a position. And so it skipped by those and it went to the next. So before, the way it worked, if you click this icon, it wouldn't advance unless you filled in the position. Or if you click twice, it would go to the next position that was missing a step, but the click twice didn't work consistently. So now if I click here again, we're on step 35, it'll take me to the next one, and it'll show me that step 73 is missing, and you can use this to step through them. Obviously, the idea is that you're supposed to be fixing the positions as you're stepping through, but in the case where, everybody maintains their own section of the script, and maybe you don't have the knowledge to be able to update all the positions, you want to have that be a shared responsibility, then that's why we had this feature added. We added the ability to associate a test round to a specific project. So if we go, no, I don't have it here. If we go to the testing tab and say that we're creating a new test round, and we select some of those test scripts and then say next. In TransIT 4, there was always an ability to select the project, and that went away in TransIT 5, and it's now back. So again, when you're setting up your test round, if you associate it to the specific project you want, it makes it easier to do things like associate issues to a specific project, etc. So again, that's back now and can be used. On the test report, there were certain filters that were missing that have now been added. So you couldn't filter on the application and you couldn't filter on the task. So you can see those filters have been added. So if I want to filter to just FirstNet, then I can filter to just FirstNet. If I want to filter on a specific task number, I can do that too. So again, basic functionality that's been added, but hopefully everyone will find useful. Again, tester level users can no longer inactivate or restore test rounds. I'm not going to show that. I did show this already. So I showed from the test open scenarios box that when you filter, it keeps the test step number. The same is true for filtering in the scenarios steps page in general. So it used to be if you would want to click on, let's see, what's the next? Unit clerk. So if I wanted to see the unit clerk steps before, when I filtered on unit clerk, it would bring me the unit clerk steps, but it would start them numbering at 1. So it's really actually the 30th step in the scenario. So now you can filter and you can know where it is. So if changing something in here was impacting whatever was next, I know it's step 41 and I know I can take off my filter and start at step 42. So this as well makes it a lot easier to update test scripts. I don't know how many people, there are a few organizations that are using the custom vendor. So under org settings, under vendors, you now have the custom vendor back. It was there, but it wasn't working properly. So now if we go to custom and you click here, you now have a plus at the top. So that went away between TransIT 4 and TransIT 5 and it's back. And so the thought for custom is if you have any in-house development you're doing or reports or whatever, you can add them inside TransIT yourself. If it's something custom, it wouldn't make sense for us to have it and have all clients have access to it. And again, it can be, you can add products, applications, and functions. So, you know, if you've got lots of web development or Wayfinder apps that are specific to you, any of that kind of stuff, you can add it here. Again, I can't show this next one really, which was that if you inactivated a user and that user had a position assigned to them, so say it was reg clerk, then the reg clerk didn't show up on your roster and that's now been fixed. The functional test scenarios. So it used to be that in here, when you added a section name, it would allow you to put special characters in it. But when you did put special characters in it, it stopped things from displaying correctly on the test dashboard. So now you're blocked from doing it. So if I'm going to add something here, and we'll just pick anything because it doesn't really matter. When I go to give it a section name and I want to like use some special characters in it, it didn't tell me that I couldn't do it. So I'll have to check into that one because yeah, no, it let me do it. It's not supposed to allow you to do it. Maybe it's only quotes that it's stopping because it was quotes that were giving the problems. Again, seems like that one's not working. We added the ability to multi-select issues and change fields. And if you're using our issue list a lot, you'll really be happy with that fix. So let's see what I have in the issues that's got. So in here, if I were to go and look at the open issues, for example, and say, you know, we were doing something, say you wanted to change the requested date on them, or say even you wanted to change who the assigned was. So say you wanted to go here and you wanted to filter on anything that was FirstNet. Oops. and you wanted to assign those all to the same person, you didn't used to be able to do it. So now you can easily go in and filter by application, and you can change the assigned and assign it to whomever you want. Much faster than the way you had to do it before, which was individually. So you can see it assigned them all to me. Then also, because we didn't have the ability to assign a project to a test round, you had to manually move issues to a specific project. So you won't need to use this feature quite as much as we used to before. But now if they were assigned, so if we, and I'm not sure if people know, if you right click the header, you can go to the columns and you can add in your project in your test round. So what you didn't used to be able to do was multi-select and change the project. So if I decided, okay, these got logged to the wrong project and these are all supposed to be in a different project, I can now right click, use change project, and move them to the project that they're supposed to be in. So we're at time. I'm going to keep going, and I realize some people will have to drop off, but if I keep going, I can at least post it to the website. And I thank everyone for participating. And sorry we went over today. We talked about it being the first release of security for plans. So if we go to the plans page, there's now this little column here that tells you whether or not security is turned on for that plan. So if I wanted to turn on security for a plan, I can edit that plan. And when I edit that plan, I turn on plan security. When I turn on plan security, these other fields here become more useful. So you can say what the roles are that can be used here. Obviously, this is used in conjunction with our roles feature, and the roles are added on the user page. So you can select what your project manager role is, and I don't even know if we have a project manager built out here. Looks like we don't. But again, you fill in who the project manager is and who the project manager users are. You select those from the list, and then you create your team roles, and then the people who are in those team roles. And then you can select any of these boxes, whether or not assigned users can update their activities, whether users in an assigned role can also update activities, and whether you want to restrict a view of the whole project to only the people, plan to only the people on that project team. So again, the most important thing is that if you're not using plans, is that you would start using plans and then figure out which ones you want to include security on. Again, the request came to us from a client who wanted to start using it for ERP type applications. And they said, we often attach things like pay scales, etc., to our plans or to issues in the plans, and we didn't want people to have access to that. So now there is security there, and there'll likely be additional security features rolling out as well in the near future. Okay, next, you can assign multiple roles to an activity in a plan, which you didn't used to be able to do. So you could always assign multiple people here, but now you can also assign multiple roles. So if I go in to edit this, I can choose the role of access management team and the role of acute nursing. So I didn't used to be able to do that, and now I can. Again, I talked about it used to be when you inserted. So this plan has I don't know what the plan start date is, so let's look at that first. So this cutover plan, the plan date on it is September 2022. So literally before, whenever I inserted a task, it would come up with that September 2022 date. So now if I insert above, instead of defaulting to September, it defaults to the date of the one below it. So much easier to manage tasks in a plan that way than to have to constantly go and update the date. And then I can't really demonstrate this either, talked about the ability to automate, send messages for the people who are assigned activities in a plan. And again, that one was you need to notify us if you want to turn that on because it's not turned on by default. Again, when you're using TransIT for doing cutover plans and you build them as separate plans, and then you want to look at your multi-plan view, you right click and go to multi-plan view. It used to be that the issue, and I don't know if this one has any issue, it does. It used to be that you couldn't hyperlink to your issue. And actually, this doesn't even look like I put this in the what's new, but here actually we've separated. The issue used to be a link here, but now it's in a separate column. But you can see now you can hover and see it in multi-plan view. Number one, this wasn't a hyperlink, so it was there, but you couldn't get to it. But number two, you couldn't hover and see what the text is, and now you can. Again, I can't really show you that the alignment didn't work on the activities page. If we go in and go back to plans, all it was when you were in the edit activity, these were not lined up, and now they're lined up again. And then I also can't show the inability to edit a task if it had single quotes in. Believe me, it didn't work though. So now we're down to our tips and tricks. So I already showed this one. Make sure you remind people about this browser refresh. It keeps your current settings. And I think I do have somewhere a example. So here's a global workflow, and our global workflows didn't used to have a lot of details in, and we're now by intention putting a lot more of these square bracketed fields in. So I talked about that client we were working with that had 20 and 30 appointments in each test script. And so in the case here, your workflow is going to come with it saying appointment type in it. And if you're using 10 different appointments in that scenario, your first one will be appointment type, and you'll change one the second to be 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. And you see the same with appointment date and appointment time. And then if you have to change the days that you're running it or the dates, instead of having to go and make major changes to your script, all you do is you go in and update the information in the header, and it carries forward. So really there's a lot of different use cases for having these square bracketed fields built right into your workflows and into the scenarios. And we really hope that people start to make good use of them. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to show, and I'm not sure how many people are interested in this, but specifically if you're using plans and using custom columns in plans, I think I have one here that's an example. So in this case, the idea is this for a clinical backload, and so in this case we've put in the room and bed. And so then when they registered the patient, they put in the FIN number here, and then people needed to go in and do height, weight, and allergies, non-med orders, specific documentation pieces they wanted entered in. The med orders were done separately by pharmacy, and then they did a quality check, and then they reconciled. But the question was like, I wanted to build a custom list for this field. So you can see if I click here, they are allowed to enter blocked, done, or not done. So the question is, how do you get something like that to be built in? So what you do is you go to org settings. Under org settings, you all have, or all of your admins have something called custom. If you click on this custom, it allows you to build out these custom fields. So you can see in this case, I've built out a yes, no, or a custom done. To build it, you click here and you give it a name. It has to start with the word custom, and if you don't put custom, it'll tell you didn't. And so this is going to be custom list, we're going to call it. Once you save it, you click inside here, and then you need to add variables. So if you wanted to add things like whatever you wanted to add, and there's my list. And so now when I go to a plan and I go to one that has custom columns in it, I don't really, I'll add a new one because I don't really want to screw up my existing ones. So you go to change columns, custom columns. I'm going to add a new column. And then I'm going to say it's text type. And I'm going to go oh, I don't know what my display sequences are. So I'll call it 58. And then I say the reference group is my custom list that I just built, and I click save. I go back to my plan. It's got this week. And now if I want to edit this, it'll show the list that I just built here. So again, very little known about feature and function, but it can come in very handy. I know we're way over time. Does anybody have any questions for this session? Okay, if not, I thank you for participating. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.